Okay, that's great. Okay, I'm talking today to Terry Walsh, now resident in the USA, high performance coach there. Terry is a quiet man, in my opinion, a great thinker and a great scholar of the game. So, welcome, Terry.
Good to see you, Tim.
Terry, what would you say are the critical factors in developing a winning hockey team?
Critical factors, I think that there are many, and I don't think that there's confinement to those. I think the biggest part is having a process that's really, really clear and consistent, and it challenges everybody, both as a group and individually. And I think within that you have your playing process as a group, which are examples of pressing styles, outletting styles, the way you want to build through the midfield. And then you've got, of course, the skill acquisition pieces of process development. So that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, you can define all sorts of things, whether reverse stick flick on the lob is part of that skill acquisition. Yeah, I guess it is. But that development process, which clearly defines improvement, is really what it's about for me. And it's not a short-term piece; it's a long-term time of frame that really brings about those changes. It's not an instantaneous fix.
Yeah. Okay. In the ladies' game, how important is it these days to have a specialist drag flicker?
Yeah, it's fairly important. I think that if you've got one who is outstanding, then that has to. A lot of it's to do with the development, the cultural development within groups. And obviously, it's much more prolific in somewhere like Holland than it is in Australia. It has been historically. So you have a lot more young kids doing it, and hence you get a much better pick of the pack, as it were, because the process is being
developed.
It's in the shadows, really. It's hidden development that takes place. Whereas I know for a fact that in the Australian system you tend to get them at the end of the process, and you try and enhance that as much as you possibly can. It's a very different picture, and to be able to pick that up at a much earlier stage and understand those pieces that are really required in the process of development, in actual fact enhances the young ones, because they copy the older ones. As simple as that. So if they're copying bad stuff, that's what you get.
I understand it. In any team, you go through this selection process, and you no doubt you come to the final cut when you've got players who maybe they're similar, maybe they're different, but you have to make that final decision. How do you select one player over another?
Well, I think that there's the factor of performance. So the performance piece is ultimately the key. And then you've got the ability for players to play within the system. And often when you're talking about those players whom you spend most of the time with reference to discussions on selection, you're talking about 15 and 16, or 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That group of players you're talking about more than you're talking about the others by a lot. Quite honestly, it's a bad process in some ways. What's really important is that you get the right balance with those people. But sometimes we get caught up in all of that, and you end up with, I've heard it described in a variety of ways, from flipping a coin, which I think is just not appropriate, through to, it's so close that we have to make the call. And in reality that's true, but there are some distinct reasons why you pick 15 and 16 versus 17 and 18. As an example, if you go to the Olympics and you have to pick 17 and 18, to be careful the style of mentality that you're choosing to take that role, because it's a very different role from being inside the group. And so you have to be very careful psychologically about how you choose those players. So there's different components for different things, and of course you're trying always to ensure that you make the best decision for these people to be able to perform under pressure at the Olympics, which is ultimately the test. And so you hear commentary, well, it's too late to pick the team and all this sort of stuff. Well, it's just pressure, which is really part of the process of being able to handle the pressure at the Olympics. And so I think many of the very good coaches are quite comfortable to leave the pressure of selection out there consistently and see how people operate within that role. But there is a point at which you have to make a call, of course, and you have to bring it down to a reasonable number. Having 40 versus having 20 is different, significantly different.
The final cut, basically. Okay, well, you've got down to this final process. Now you've got these players, and you've got these, 16, 17, 18 travelling to wherever. and you've got this different psychological influence which you're dealing with. How do you motivate the individual players?
I think you're in a bad place with your group if you've got to try and motivate them, quite frankly.
Okay.
I think the motivation at any level, and it's all relative. It doesn't matter whether you're playing with under 15s or you're playing with an Olympic team. Relatively,
yes,
it's, for them, it's the same piece. Motivation driven from within, obviously, and I think that the best psychological type programs enable you to do that, be in control of yourself, and without being too simplistic about it. The Zen type mentality versus the rah mentality is a preferable one from my perspective.
Okay, so you've got this group of motivated individuals. Somebody's not doing what they should be doing. How do you then criticise them?
Well, I think that's part of the whole process.
Yeah.
When you're criticising or making commentary, and making commentary is a much better way than using the term criticism. You've got to go past that.
Yes.
And in my view, women are a more vulnerable group in that area than men. Men are, if it's black, it's black. If it's white, it's white. Yeah. And women, sometimes you have to say this is a sharp, dark grey. And that, I mean, that's just reality, and I think that's just part of life. No problem with that, but I think you have to move to a place where people understand that a comment, which is for the betterment of the group, is acceptable. That's what it is, and you have to live with that. And sometimes a sharp comment is a way to go, but being demonstratively derogatory to somebody is ridiculous. In a blatant way or in a group setting, that's just crazy.
Okay, we see players these days breaking out from the full-back position, coming up the field, halves coming up, scoring goals. How do you develop this all-round player?
Again, I think it's part of the whole process, which has been driven by the rules. The rule changes have brought a much different full-back mentality. If you take the Australian way of thinking, which I think is fair, every culture has got one. The full-back mentality from 30 years ago to 20 years ago to 10 years ago to today is, in my view, very different. And the ability to self-play and to create play out of the backfield just by moving the ball yourself creates a situation where you have to have much better ball handlers. And of course, because you've got much better ball handlers in that area, then that creates a situation all over the ground where they can play. And you see some players, and we have them. I mean, we've got players who are playing in the front line who have normally been defenders, and it tends to be that way more than the other way normally, but you can do that.
Yes.
You can actually, in my view, a quality player can play in the backfield more easily than the other way around.
Okay, when a player receives the ball, what's the first thing they should do?
Well, they should have had some information before they receive it. And I think that dictates what you need to be doing. I think that there are some surrounding conditions that manifest itself in that situation particularly. It's a very difficult question to answer without the specificity of where you are and what time of the game, what the score is and all the rest of it, and where you are on the pitch and what position you're playing. So I think the answers, if you're trying to nutshell the answer, is be very aware where you are on the field, understand what the situation of the game is, understand what the options are, and is it a risk or is it not a risk? Okay. Obviously, if you're inside the defensive 25 and you're 1-0 up, probably taking a risk there is not necessarily a smart thing to do. But that should be already in the DNA.
Okay. We see players running at the defence. Sometimes they'll stop and lay the ball off. Sometimes they'll take on the defence. Do you have any rules about when a player should actually take that defence on or lay the ball off?
Yeah, I think so. I think that looking at the defensive structure of the opponent, really the person you're coming up against is really the covering piece. What you're looking at is what's going on behind. Well, you should be, in my view, because that dictates what you can do. If you've got a one-on-one style situation, which has been created quite a lot in this little series here with the Australians and the USA, then probably got a reasonable chance to go one-on-one legitimately, and so the things like the tracking line, the change of pace, the ability to keep the necessarily have the ball immediately on the end of your stick. All of those things I think are really important, to change of direction. So there are components inside that which are very important. Probably fairly different to whether or not you're if you're in the Dutch culture, for example, containing the ball possession is much more important than it is in the Australian one. We're far more risk takers, but if you take it right back, it's part of our culture. And the Germans are even more the other way. No risk at all. Thank you very much. But admittedly, they've changed their game in the last 10 years. I think they've become far more offensive in the way that they've done it, but not in the back of it.
No. Last question. We've seen a lot of rule changes in hockey over quite a number of years, and if you could change one rule today, what would you change and why?
If I could change one rule, well, I think there's several rules that we can look at. One simple rule that I think is very easily managed across the world is to take the stick above the shoulder out of the game and just play with danger, as we do everywhere. And I would change the way that we word obstruction. I think that obstruction now is still in the rule book, as has been forever. The rule hasn't changed much other than the interpretation. In my view, I would change that to make it very, very easily managed. I don't know how umpires can judge many of the things that they judge. In actual fact, I'm sure they can't. And so it becomes interpretation. And I think that puts you in a shade of grey, and that makes players frustrated and umpires frustrated. The umpires have got a very difficult task, I think, in the way that the rules are set today. And I would like to see somehow, well, not somehow, I think that there are ways that we can bring the rules back to being a little bit more black and white. And that's what I would ask to be looked at as we move forward.
Terry, I've been quite impressed with what I've seen of your USA ladies, I must say. Certainly, I'd say they're punching above their world ranking at the present time from the 3 games I've seen them play anyway. You're heading to the Olympics, so very good luck over there. I hope you do well.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for your time.